Hi, today I'm going to talk to you about the three reasons that you need support during your healing journey. First and foremost, let's just start by saying that it can be scary enough to leave the unknown behind and start on a healing journey. And to do it alone can feel even more terrifying. But the other part is that it can also be scary to let people know that you are starting to go on a healing journey and maybe that you're working with a life coach or that you're starting therapy. And so I know for me personally, when I was starting my healing journey, I didn't tell anyone that I was seeing a therapist. And when my time was done with the therapist and I started working with a life coach, I didn't tell anyone about that either. So the only person who knew that I was in therapy was my therapist and my husband. And I didn't tell anyone because I didn't want them to think less of me. I didn't want them to think that I couldn't handle life. I didn't want them to think that I was quote unquote crazy. I didn't want them to just look at me in a bad way all around because unfortunately there is some stigma around healing and therapy and working with a life coach. And when I was working with a life coach, only a few people knew that I was working with a life coach. Again, it was my husband, my life coach, and two close friends. Other than that, I kept my cards close to my chest and no one knew. But I had wished now looking back that I had been more open with the people in my life when I was going through my healing journey because it would have brought so much more value to the experience and I would have felt less alone because in that time it felt lonely AF to be seeing a therapist, to be working with a life coach because I felt like I was the only one in this world on the entire planet who was suffering and needed to heal from past trauma and childhood trauma. And so really the first reason that it's important to have support in your healing journey is because of the fact that it can be lonely. So if you can share with someone else, it allows you to feel like you're less alone and that you have a sounding board or a cheerleader or just so you know that you're actually not on an island alone like Tom Hanks in Castaway talking to a volleyball. The second reason that it's important to have a support system when you're going through a healing journey is because honestly, it can be a lot to manage mentally, emotionally, physically. I know, especially when I was in therapy, and that was really the heart of, I'll say that my healing journey, because in that time I learned about the fact that I was codependent. I learned that I was an anxious person, even though I never considered myself to be one. And I also learned about childhood emotional neglect and that I was being impacted by that. And so I would leave those sessions exhausted because I would sit in that therapist chair and I would cry and cry and cry and sob. I mean, hysterically. I couldn't wear makeup on those days because I would literally leave with the raccoon eyes from all the crying that I did. And I don't know about you, but if I cry a lot, then I am exhausted and I need to just give myself time to just check out and do nothing. And unfortunately, that was not the case when I was going through therapy because more often than not, I had my 3-year-old home with me at the time. And so I would have to go to therapy very early in the morning while my husband stayed home with Casey. And then as soon as I was done therapy, he'd meet me at the therapist's office. I would put Casey in my car and we'd drive home and then he'd continue on to work. Or I would have to bring Casey with me to therapy and she would sit on the floor and play while I talked to the therapist, trying not to lose it in front of her because I didn't want her seeing that. So then that was also exhausting, trying to keep in all the emotion that I needed to express but couldn't do so because I didn't want to put that on to Casey, who was only 3 at the time. So if I had to get Casey from my husband early in the morning, I had to go home with Casey and be on and present for her all day because my husband wouldn't get home from work until later in the evening, closer to the girls' bedtime. But also we would have to go pick up my daughter, who was in 1st grade at the time, from school. So I was doing all these things, managing all these things, and didn't have time to just decompress, catch my breath, and give myself the space that I needed if I needed to sleep, or if I needed to continue crying, or if I needed to just chill out and binge watch Netflix for the day, then I could have the space to do that. But I didn't have a support system in place. I couldn't count on my husband to stay home from work that day. And so it would have been super helpful if I had shared what I was going through. So I could have asked my mom or a friend, or have someone from like care.com or something like that come and stay with Casey for a couple of hours so I could have that time. And so the third reason that it's really super important to have a support system when you're going through your healing journey is because it can get so hard at times, managing all the things that you're learning about why you're feeling the way that you're feeling, why you're experiencing the things that you're experiencing, and really striving to overcome them and process them and create more empowering patterns and beliefs and a life that's more serving for you. Sometimes it's so hard and it's so scary that it feels like you just want to throw in the towel. And there were so many times where I had that feeling where it was like, that's it, I'm done. I'm not doing any more of this inner work. I'm not doing any more personal growth. I'm not doing any more of this. I'm going to just continue being the way that I am right this second in this moment, because I don't want to feel this. I don't want to learn any more about all of this trauma. I don't want it. And so if I had had someone to support me along the way, it would have probably been easier for me to keep going at times rather than feeling like I wanted to check out or just give up completely on the journey. And so that is the three reasons that you need someone to be there for you and just offer you support while you're on your healing journey. It's so helpful to have that cheerleader. It's so helpful to have that support system, that sounding board, and someone that's been there and that understands what you're going through. Even if they haven't been there in going through what you've been through, just knowing that they are compassionate for you, they're giving you grace and being willing to listen and be that shoulder that you need to lean on sometimes is so important. So I can make it easier to see the healing journey through to the end, or make more progress than if you didn't have someone there to help and guide you. So those are the three reasons that you need support while you're on your healing journey.